Hey, welcome to another installment of Shop Talk Tuesday from Manoa Guy Bicycles, hanging out in the garage. And I'm typically standing in front of my, tool wall, but we actually have a special guest today. So this is going to be actual interview-ish review and also industry topics that we're going to be talking about that affects small shops, medium shops, big shops, and also the industry in itself. So we're going to go through a few of those bullet points with a special guest. I'll introduce him in a few seconds here. If you're watching this on the replay, sorry, there's going to be some advertisements. I try to do the lives without advertisements from everybody so it doesn't disrupt the conversation. But if you want to join us on Tuesday at 10 o'clock on Mountain Time, that's when I do the Shop Talk Tuesday. And a lot of you guys are part of the industry itself. This is going to be a great topic to talk or listen into or talk on that as well. I know a lot of you use this as a podcast in the background and listen to it while you're working in a shop. So that's awesome. Thank you for joining us here. And I'm in Colorado. My special guest is actually in a couple of different time zones away, and a little bit later for him, more lunchtime. And we're going to dive into some interesting tidbits of what he has in his experiences and the platform he has developed. Hint, hint, there's the dangling carrot for everyone here. So without further ado, let's just dive into this, and let's bring Trey from Industry Grease to the show. Hey, welcome. Welcome to Manoa Guy Bicycles and hanging out with the guy, as it says right there. And first off, saw your little platform, got some light underneath Bicycle Retailer. I read the article and I was like, oh, this is kind of intriguing. And I looked into it, and it was like, there was a paywall on it, but it was pretty insignificant cost. And I was like, well, for this kind of information and so forth, and we'll go into the platform a little bit here, clicked it, bought into it, and I was like, oh, there's not so much here. Not to say there won't be, and there will be, but I felt like I joined the party a little soon. They're still doing decorations and putting up the music and so forth. Instead of sitting there and just like pissing and moaning about it, I decided like, well, let's get a hold of Trey here, and the guy that's got this great concept, which has been in conversations through my platform before, through different live streams. And some individuals are like, hey, we need a kind of a safe place for us, either industry people, mechanics, shop owners, and others to kind of get together without basically too scrutinized by the industry, and also basically pay it forward and help other shops out in other areas in our markets. And it doesn't have to be across the street. It could be across the nation. So in any case, I reached out, and here we go. We have Trey here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit of background, and we'll go into the platform in a little bit.
Yeah. Hey, Justin. Hey, thanks for having me on here, man. This is great. I been checking out your channel and whatnot, and at first I saw your page and kind of what everything you did with on the retail side and how your operations work, and I was actually pretty impressed because it is different, and it's also fulfills one of those kind of gaps on the retail side of our industry. So I thought that was really cool. And then when I came onto your YouTube channels, I was like, oh, this is actually more industry related than just down and dirty, just BSing about what's going on in the shop and whatnot. So yeah, it's great. Yeah, just to give you a little bit of background on me, I've worked in and out of this industry for a little over 35 years. I cut my teeth as the proverbial shop rat in a small blue collar town where there really wasn't a real big riding presence at all. In fact, I lived 10 minutes from the largest refinery in the U.S., Exxon, and we had flat roads, hot, humid, and whatnot. But I grew up in that BMX era where everyone wanted a BMX bike, and I only got to have subscription.
What decade was that?
Oh, I was this was late 70s, early 80s. So I got BMX Action and BMX Plus for my birthday every year, and my Sears MX bike was converted to a BMX bike by just slapping a road bike seat type thing on it and whatnot. But I was really passionate about it. I loved the mechanics. I loved the freedom of riding, and we did that back in the day, back in the neighborhood. That's how you got around. But uh, I was always scared to walk into a shop because I always knew that was just out of our affordability. And uh, so I remember going to a shop one time and buying stickers to put on my little number plate that I put on my Sears bike, and it was great. But as I got older, I thought, I'm gonna get a job soon out of high school. So my senior year, I started kind of peeking into the bike shop down the street and hanging out. And next thing you know, I'm kind of like going there every day and hanging out pretty much all day, every day. And I didn't know what a shop rat was, but I'm fetching lunch, doing things, cleaning their shop rags, whatever. And I started getting money for graduation. Like people, for some reason, I guess they were amazed I was about to graduate high school. I was myself, and yeah, I had $300, and I thought I was going to buy a really nice bike with that because the department store bike was 60 to $70 back then, and I was shocked that that would not cover it, and that kind of started my path. But and this will probably get a lot of haters, but I hung out at the shop for probably 4 or 5 months before I actually could buy a bike. And I finally bought a bike from their main competitor. And, and I showed up just not super naive. I had a pair of bike shorts with my underwear underneath them. And I had a bike stuffed in my trunk and my back seat of my car. And I was showing up for their Thursday ride, which was basically a kind of an urban assault. And I pulled out my bike, had this giant smile on my face, and they were just kind of looking at me with this look. And I was just like, I realized then what I had done. And, but it's a testament though of I went to a shop that offered me an opportunity that I would have had to wait another few months to buy a bike. They had like this 0% financing for 0 down, 3 months, same as cash kind of thing. And I was like, and there's the Bridgestone, and I was like, wow, this thing's better equipped than the bike I was looking at. And yeah, but I always look back at that and relate to that experience as a customer because, not that the guys who I'm still great friends with at that original shop that eventually hired me, but, the relationship that we had was stronger than me going for what I wanted. Because I didn't care as much about who sold me the bike. I just was dying to have a bike. And that kind of gives me a perspective of what today's consumers do. And so from there, they finally hired me. And I bounced around a couple of different shops, went to work for, in fact, the original manager of the shop I worked at opened his own shop, and I worked at there for a long time in Houston. This was 93, 94. And he was a hustler. He could drum up business from out of thin air. He had a shop van that he would do local pickup and mobile repairs. And this is 30 years ago, and he was doing that. The MS-150 was a big thing for us in that area. So the Houston to Austin ride, I know the last time I worked it, I think they capped it at 13,000 riders. I think it's jumped from there, but
Yeah, we have that similar here in Colorado. Not as big as yours, though. I think ours has lost attendance over the years, but hearing that big number, I remember the heydays where it was like massive amount, and that was a great way for shops to actually get exposure.
But we had corporate accounts. We started like you would go out and visit these companies and help put together a bike club, and I have the jersey to prove it. But we had the biggest team that we sponsored out there, 400 riders on one corporate team. It was Enron, but it was the culture that we built, and we were a hallway shop. We were Schwinn shops early on, until that kind of fell out, and then we started doing other brands as well. But it was amazing to see how we networked outside from the shop, and this is still before the internet and e-commerce. We were doing that prior, and I think envisioning the possibilities of that uh, was really critical in kind of in how I thought things worked in a community. When you work with people, instead of just waiting for enthusiasts to come to you, you go out and build that community to come to you. So from there, I went, worked for a big box store for a little bit because at the time, little shops can't afford benefits and things like that. So I was getting older. I was getting hurt a lot because I was racing and I needed, insurance. So there was a big box shop in town where they had 300 bikes on the floor, but also sold like outdoor gear and whatnot. And it was very boring. Uh, we didn't have the culture there, but we had the volume, and we sold a ton of stuff. But it showed me how an organized shop works when you have the type of assets and finances to do things like you have a buyer, you have a separate warehouse person, you have, and it worked on another spectrum that I hadn't seen before. So in 2005, I moved to uh, Georgia, and I was in college this whole time. I did both I worked in shops all throughout my undergrad, and graduate school, and when I moved to Georgia, I kind of thought I would, keep taking my professional career to the next level, but I ended up getting a job at Maxis, which I still am not sure how or why they hired me. I do know why they hired me because I've talked to the guy that hired me then, but since then, but I didn't have any experience on the supply side of things, but uh, I started and launched the CST brand, which was a high value, low cost tire, or high quality, low cost tire uh, that was as durable as the Maxxis stuff. It didn't have all the technology built into it to be light and it was grippy and whatnot, but it was half the cost. And that was weird because I had to promote a tire without using my racers and all the excitement and fireworks and stuff that Maxxis got to use. And uh, it was hard trying to relate to the consumer or industry didn't really focus on that much, or at least the culture didn't. So that was probably I had a lot of fun doing that. Stressful, a lot of travel, but I got to see the insides of how the planning worked when it came to manufacturing. Because back then, this was 2005, 2008. We sold to OEM, we sold to distributors, we sold to retailers, and we sold direct to customer as well. We had a online, marketplace. So, I saw how that juggled, and I tell you right now, every manufacturer and supplier out there, they do not like dealing with the general public. It's a lot to manage, uh, and I still think that's true today. Just I think it's becoming a necessary evil, and we can talk about that more later. But um, during the layoffs, when the whole housing market fell out, a third of the company got laid off, and then I was going to go wrench temporarily or something, maybe at a shop. I knew some, of course, I knew a lot of the local shops, and I reached out to Dan Thornton over at Free Flight Bicycles, and he had a new store that they had opened, and he wanted me to manage it. He knew me through his knowing some of the shops that I had worked at before, and he wanted me to come in even if it was temporary to manage the store. And I completely redesigned the store from scratch, and the layout and whatnot. And it was to build a mountain bike culture, because I like mountain bikes mostly. And the he wanted to kind of help establish, because we have, like, I live 15 minutes from one of the most populated trails in the nation. Uh, I think it was like top 5. And it's and we have several trails around us, so we have a huge mountain bike culture here, which is great. And I'm in Atlanta, by the way. We're just north of Atlanta, in case anyone was wondering. But so I managed. This was during when e-commerce finally started blowing up. I'd worked in the shop before, during, and after the internet had hit, and then left it, and then came back to the retail side when all the online marketplaces were blowing up, the discounted stuff where you could get, parts cheaper than wholesale, and that was really disrupting the retail channels and how they did things, and having to deal with customers coming in. Well, why are you charging more for this? And so I had a upfront look at that, and then from there, I basically was still looking for something on the B2B side of the industry, and my buyer from Holly that I sold to kept pushing me to be a rep, and I did not want to be a rep. I had I had two young daughters that were both under 2 years old, and I was thinking like, there's no way, that's one of the hardest jobs. I know reps, and they kept pushing and pushing, and I said, "What the heck? I'm going to go check it out." And I was really impressed, and it was a very supportive company of the reps and whatnot, and that meant a lot. And it was surprising how much I really liked doing that job, as hard as it was. But what was really important to me, and I don't think I could have ever tried to start this platform without it, was being a rep gives you a front row seat to both what suppliers are going through and what retailers are going through. And when you have a few hundred different suppliers with a few hundred different challenges, and then you have that many more retailers in such a diverse layout, you start to see why the right hand's not talking to the left hand very well. And that was eye-opening. And that's what really got my head spinning as far as kind of what I thought needed to be done, but couldn't, because there wasn't a place to do it, if that makes sense. And then I worked on the media side for a while. I wrote tech reviews, did storytelling, and then, enjoyed doing that, both on the print and the digital side. I wrote for Bike Rumor, wrote for Dirt Rag, and a few others. And then I went and got a real job one day, which
That was a long time until I got a real job.
it was funny, but I had some marketing experience and whatnot, and I got brought on. They were 10 minutes down the road, and I was a marketing director for a company in the commercial and residential audio video industry.
I think everybody has been in the industry as long as we have. We've all ducked out for a hot minute or two, and realized that we're not as passionate. I mean, mine was working for Big Five Sporting Goods, which is kind of like a smaller version of Sports Authority or something like that. And coming back into the industry, which my wife actually forced me to do because she didn't want me to work weekends all the time. And somehow I got a bike shop job as an inventory manager. And half the pay, but twice much, double the life, kind of thing. So that was just a little snapshot of me.
Yeah. But what was interesting is that, I got to live on the digital side. I learned what made the internet go bump in the middle of the night. I learned a lot of digital campaigns and whatnot. But the really telling part of stepping outside the industry was the trade shows. I went to several trade shows, like we didn't just have one main one. I went to probably in the span of 2 years, went to probably 10 trade shows. And some of them were ginormous. The ones in Europe were huge. But the crazy part was, and one of the main trade shows here was the same company that owned Interbike. Yeah. And it was an entirely different, despite a very similar makeup in industry where you have retail supply channels and, whatnot. Their show, even though it was product based, everyone went there to learn. It was, they went there, they had multiple workshops that sold out. And it wasn't just a supplier providing training or insights on things going on. It was, third-party companies providing training, certifications, or technical things, They have a point system to where if you're a certain level technician, this kind of company wants you to hire you to work on certain, kind of like we have a little bit of
Yeah.
on Rich, but it was amazing seeing people sell out these workshops and training sessions and guest speakers. It was all people traveled there. There was a return on investment. I really think that that's what trade shows need to do, and that's where Interbike failed, is that they weren't offering a return on your investment. It was neat going there, but in a digital age, there wasn't there much there that you couldn't get from online. And I think Cab has done a great job. I haven't been to one of their shows yet, but I think they're evolving in alignment with a lot of what the industry wants and needs. I thought the handmade bike show was fantastic, and that how it brought a different atmosphere to seeing the products, but we were still missing that education aspect. And that's something I hope to see the industry take more value of.
Yeah, I went to the CABDA show in Las Vegas this year, that's where they had the MBDA. They did a dual show basically. They took the MBDA's annual meeting, what have you, and jumped on the bandwagon of CABDA, and that was brilliant because you got bike people there, but you also had the learning, the training, the perspective, the talks, where, like you were saying, exactly. I went to the last two Interbike shows, and they were, I mean, it was kind of cool, but it was more like going through memory lane than anything else, because it didn't take anything away from it. But the CABDA, even though it was super small, very impactful though. Granted, you get to talk to your brands and what have you, but there's a lot of collaboration going on, more so than any other bike show I've ever kind of been to.
Yeah, I sat down and had lunch with Jim from CABDA at the NBDA summit in Bentonville last year, and that's actually where he announced the Vegas location. And I've always admired his spirit. That guy, if I could bottle half of what he puts in while owning a shop and then putting on that show and then traveling, the world would be a better place. But I think he's able to do what he does because he comes from that similar background as you, where he had that family store that's been around. And, it's not, I think there's a lot of great people in our industry, but I also think we need to look at new ways of doing things, and instead of repeating different versions of the same thing over and over again. So, and he's done that. He's done that and created that atmosphere. And I would like to see it incorporate even more return on investment for both dealers and suppliers. Suppliers go because they're trying to sell new and show off new products.
Yeah.
And dealers are there to oogle and over and network. What did you feel like you got out of it by going there, since you went as a retailer?
Well, my scenario is, I mean, as you alluded to before, it's a little different. I'm a garage shop guy. I don't have the traditional brick and mortar store. We have a condo in Vegas, so it was a win-win for me. I'm already in town after my daughter's spring break, so I'm like, okay, well, I'll just stay an extra few days and check it out. Got a place, and a buddy of mine from the old Parker Bikes days joined me. So I really had no. It was like, we'll just see what happens, and maybe I'll do a couple of YouTube videos about it and that kind of thing, and just kind of check it out. Because I've been to the Interbike back in the 90s, where it was the big, huge show, and I mean, miles and miles of products and all of that. And yes, it was small, but they had a sense of style. I mean, the first day you walk in, and we were waiting for the doors to open, and guess what? It's Vegas, and they had an Elvis impersonator come out, sing a couple songs, had a couple little dancers. I mean, it's like they embraced it. Like, we're in Vegas, we're going to do it right. And I was like, this might be a pretty cool show, just for the vibe. But after walking it, which didn't take more than an hour or two at the most, just to walk the whole thing. And a lot of people told me already it's really e-bike eccentric and that kind of thing, which is fine because that's where the big push right now, and that's what the big part of the market is. But I did get to see some of the old brands that I was familiar with, like QBP, BTI, JBI, which is all your wholesalers for parts and so forth for shops. And I was talking to them. And in lieu of that, I was like, well, how do I get these people to sell to me without having huge commitments, being not in a brick and mortar store? Which pretty much they politely, kindly said, yeah, we don't sell to you, which is fine, which may change because everybody's in some hot water right now trying to figure out how to things. But if we can work out a way as a win-win for them and myself or shops like me that are pretty small, that might work out. So that's where it kind of evolved with when I was in the show. But the overall take was, the MBDA was there, and they had a day before talks and clinics. And I've had a couple people that actually watched this, have been to a few of those, and they said actually it's pretty informative. And I read all the topic headlines, and a lot of it was how to leverage the used market and how to leverage labor, because that is the only really income that a lot of shops are getting, and they really were on point with it, and which kind of mirrored with the CABDA and their feel. And it was only a 2-day show, not like the Interbike back in the 90s, which was like 4 or 5 days. But talking to the locals, though, I did an interview with Swanee Cycles in Vegas, and they went to the show too, and they're like, "Oh, wish we knew you were there." But anyway, they were mentioning the ride events of the old Interbike days. Like they'd have all these different rides that coincide with the actual show, and they were missing that part of it. So if anything, out of any suggestions I would heard from my community would be add some ride events to it. There's some awesome riding in Las Vegas, and I'm sure the other 2 shows. I know that adds a whole new layer to the complicity of having a show, but I think that would give a little more
because, and I'm not saying they're wrong for wanting that, but one of the things too is that we have a tendency to go to these shows because we want to have fun, and it takes away from the root reasons we really should be there at these shows. I champion CABDA for having multiple locations. I ripped into Interbike on a Brain article that I wrote about why we really want it back, and it came down to still having it out west. I remember when it was in New York way back when in my early days, and and I get it. Vegas is cheap. It's easy to fly to. It's set up for those kind of things, but CABDA, because they keep it the size it is, it's easier to mobilize it into different places. And I really think that's one of the biggest things that they, nailed.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's kind of getting to back the whole trade show experience. Like we've been groomed to expect it to be fun, to have events to go to. But the most important thing we need out of a trade show where we network like that is to network and have conversations and have more organizations. And that's kind of what Industry Grease is kind of built to do in a sense. It's kind of be kind of that missing element of a trade show that you have every day. It has the networking built into it. On the front side of things, and you mentioned there's not much going on here, and that's mainly because I just launched it, went public with it, but the articles I'm putting out there, they're really aimed at. I'm not giving we've already got news, we've already got things like that out there and stats. I'm trying to drum up conversations that lean into solutions about current things going on. Everything from direct to customer to supply issues to code or to tariffs and things like that. I want discussions on those topics to get going, but really where the meat and potatoes of everything is in the forums. I built private forums for both retailers and suppliers, and then I have a community forum called the Industry Hub where everyone can come. And basically, everything on the site is free as far as reading the articles and whatnot. To join the forums, I created a paywall, and this is because I have to make money somehow. And I really wanted to do this without doing advertising because having worked in the media side of things, I understand how it can create bias and kind of distract everyone from the message. I also think that for retailers, I'm charging $35 a year for an individual. Suppliers, service providers, and media is $50 a year. It's a write-off. Uh, but it's meant to be an easy return on your investment. If you can get a little information that saves you $35 or advances you and how your business works, it pays for itself every year. And that's kind of what I am hoping to achieve. I'm hoping to achieve enough traffic that I can sustain this without doing any sort of advertising. But at the same time, I also want to give suppliers places to where they can increase their presence, where I'm not going to do any direct advertising. I have some things in place to where they can be a better resource to dealers instead of having just the consumer side of resources that they're used to, like on a company's website. With the exception of, the big suppliers out there and distributors, dealers don't have really a good resource page to go to find tech information, things like that, training videos or whatnot. And I'm trying to create a place where suppliers can provide that to dealers. It's an organizing, categorized fashion, but what I really want to do is get a lot of retailers talking with each other to help solve these things. Because one of the things, as a supplier, we would get feedback all the time from retailers, and having been a retailer, of course, I want to listen to every single thing that comes in and then put it in the right place so something gets done. But the problem was that I was getting different types of feedback, suggestions, and whatnot from different types of dealers at different times. And it's really hard to get any sort of movement when that happens. So, back in the early days when we were in shops in the 90s, everything was pretty predictable. So we really didn't need a whole lot of immense communication, so to speak. But once the internet hit and e-commerce started coming about, we tried, instead of communicating on what to do as a whole, everyone kind of went to their own, thought silos and to try to figure everything out. So you had each retailer trying to devise how they were going to approach things. Then you had suppliers doing the same thing. And suddenly you end up in this moment of chaos that's just kept increasing and increasing over time to where, we want everyone to meet our expectations, but we don't understand the inner workings of what they're capable of. So, and I kind of talked to you about this earlier, but, I want retailers to form a more uniform voice that can be presented in a more timely and organized fashion for it to actually get some movement. Suppliers, they plan everything in 3 months to a year ahead of time. And, we've seen many cases recently where, we have retailers demanding something, but then 6 months later, it all changes. And, and now it's created a huge problem and shifted the market, all while everything else is going on with things like tariffs and uncertainty. So, but if you take and understand, if the suppliers can better understand the retailer's position on a more broad scale, they can start to make more changes that, have what I would consider a more reasonable compromise that more can live with. Um, you know, Dealers are against so much with things like programs like direct to customer. Is so difficult when you have multiple suppliers doing it multiple ways, and you already have a skeleton crew trying to manage this. And, that's kind of where I want to come in and help dealers network with each other. And even when there's not a solution that the supplier can provide, the networking in the private retailer forums, it allows a dealer in Texas to communicate with someone in Idaho that may be having the similar challenges, and they may have a similar makeup. And then someone can say, well, hey, this is what I tried. Don't do that. It didn't work. This is the repercussion. Or they can say, hey, try this. This is taking off for me. And, for $35 a year, something like that can immediately pay for itself. I want it to be functional too, in a way that I kind of, when I saw how you did a lot of the used parts and whatnot, I was like, hey, I've actually got a forum, a sub forum in the industry hub that it's called I Need a Part. A retailer can just come in and say, hey, I've got a 1974 Bianchi that I need an old Nuva record, drill for, because they want to keep it original. Does anyone have one laying around? Or, it doesn't have to be vintage parts. It can be something just obscure, or, but I tell you, there's a part that everyone needs somewhere. If you have, I don't know if you remember the old Canada Black Lightning. I had a customer come in, he mangled the rear derailleur, and we couldn't get a black derailleur because all the parts that came on that bike I sent to her were black. And it was just for that bike. And I was thinking, like, man, I bet someone has one of those laying around, and some guy really wants that on his bike, to make it, black again. But that's I tried to create things from a point of perspective where I was a retailer, what I wish I could talk and suggest. And then as a supplier as well, I wanted to create a place where suppliers can talk about some of the challenges they have, especially small suppliers. There's so many, like, we think of suppliers as like QBP or Maxis and some of the big people out there, but there's a lot of small companies. And I've talked to and consulted some of the smaller companies, and I've helped do some product development over the years. And anyone new to this industry trying to get, some, eyes on their product, have no idea how hard it is and to approach. And it's the same thing in the retail. People open bike shops that have never worked around bicycles before, and all of a sudden they're like, whoa, this is not what I thought it was. So I'm trying to also, help new people that are trying to get, into this, with maybe if they have a smaller company or smaller product. So
Yeah, that's well, you touched on, obviously you have like a trifecta piece, it's like a tripod of different supports for that. And you're right, bike industry is almost like no other. It's weird. It's always has been weird. It attracts a lot of bizarre owners, and I'm one of them. And it's like we all have different characters, and then you get all of those different characters in a room. Sometimes it's productive, and sometimes it's just crazy. But when you're looking at that, you've seen over the years there's a need, and you hit it definitely on the head with especially smaller shops, because as watching other shops through this YouTube experiment I've been going through, I've had several followers follow me because they know I'm a small shop, and they are too. And they're immediately having challenges because they've only been in the mix for maybe 2 years. And some of them is like, oh, owning a bike shop would be fun. And not realizing, have you ever worked in a shop first? It is, I mean, you can get a lot from it. And that's why we're very passionate and still in it. But we're not here to make big bucks. We're here to build communities, and for the most part, and smaller shops they have these huge struggles where a place to go and have those conversations in kind of a safe place with other dealers globally can really help them drive their business. And unfortunately, a couple of shops just they had to close. It just couldn't make it work. And then there's one shop, I've had some chatter with him through chat. He's out in Pennsylvania, And he started his shop and he thought it'd be a mountain bike shop and do this. And all of a sudden, within like 3 months, he redirected and he's doing e-bike and scooter repair. I mean, it's like he was able to adapt and change, but man, it took a head twist and now he's doing good. But that first year was a real struggle.
Yeah, I helped it's funny you mentioned that because I remember helping exactly one of those people. He was an engineer that had retired. He had money. He wanted to open a shop. He was in triathlons and he wanted to open a pro shop, but he was carrying specialized bikes, which of course they're going to require you buy certain number of bikes and whatnot. And he had these bikes, these comfort bikes sitting in boxes. He's like, I'm not building that. I don't want those out. Like he was just going to let them collect dust. And we were in the Woodlands, Texas, which is a huge suburb. It's massive. Houston's massive in its own, but it's basically just a huge white collar suburb. They had greenways before anyone was doing greenways. And I basically was like, I'm going to build every one of those bikes and they're going to sell the first week. And I wasn't even really working there. I was actually taking another job and passed by and saw his shop and thought, see if he needed some help. They were still building out. And sure enough, he's like, holy cow. It's like, and it just changed this whole thing. And I'm not negating like that's what people want to do. Much of what I want to go into on my platform is talk about personal happiness. I like one of the worst things to do is to do something you love and then hate it. So I want people to become more organized and have better understanding, be less stressed, have more time to ride, understand how to treat employees and how to weigh the things that employees want and get ahead of it, not wait till it spiraled and then there's just this toxic, tone in the air. But I want to talk a lot about things like that. I feel like something you mentioned, about, the guy that started a mountain bike shop and ended up repairing electric scooters and stuff. The last article I wrote kind of dives into that because, and I've said this for years, but I think that a lot of shops misunderstand the value that consumers have. Back in the 90s, we had, they valued us because they had to. There was nowhere else to go. But, and anyone, I challenge anyone to argue this, but if you have a hobby and you have the internet and something you're passionate about, you're going to go look up everything you can to learn about it. And because you want to be more involved with it. And that includes repairing things or learning more about what parts are available or what other people are doing and communicating with peers. Well, a lot of shops have kind of built up this animosity against consumers about not valuing what they have. And the thing is, the shops are right that they do offer this value, but we've got to champion the fact that consumers value the same thing that got us to work in a bike industry ourselves. So, they're learning how to work on things, messing it up sometimes, often actually, but they didn't value us back then because organically they valued us because they had to. There was no other resource to learn or do things like there is now. So, I think understanding that will help shops understand or come up with better ways to show their value to consumers without trying to shove it in their face or have this kind of like, you just need to respect me because I'm an expert kind of approach. And, I also mentioned in this last article I just wrote about, the intimidation factor. Like I preach all the time about, are we going after the consumers we don't know about? We're a specialty bicycle industry. And I want people to start to kind of realize that, I think 2/3 to 3/4 of the bikes that people buy are still from department stores.
Mhm.
And there's lots of reasons, but the biggest one is the intimidation factor. People think we are a bunch of pro level, people that sell nothing but crazy bikes you see in the Tour de France and or on Red Bull Rampage. People don't see past the trees of what is really going on with mountain biking. And it's and then the whole commuter market, the e-bike market, the micromobility things going on. And I suggested maybe there could be a division of what a specialty bike shop is and a bread and butter shop, because a lot of the specialty bike shops, they have their biggest sellers are bread and butter bikes, the sub $1,000 bikes. So why not have a shop that specializes in bread and butter bikes, but can also make room for a price gap bike that might fall in between that department store? We've always been looking for a price gap bike, but there's not a margin that can satisfy taking up X amount of floor space to do that. So it never takes off. But, things like that, you would have a bread and butter shop, maybe, that had a price gap bike, but then they could also explore the micro scooters and the weird little e-bikes kids are running around the neighborhood on. Because I tell you, I live in a suburban neighborhood, and in the last 5+ years, it's exploded of how many kids I see out.
Oh yeah.
And regardless if it's an e-bike or a regular bike, and we have hills here, so you have to be kind of an Olympic athlete to get around. And so you see these kids in the neighborhood not playing video games. It's insane. And then you also see this old guy with a beard and a basket on his bike coming up the hill in front of my house, which I refuse to ride up because it's a long, steep hill. And he's got a big old smile on his face, and he's got this giant gray beard. And, I'm like, that is who we need to start focusing on, but also create a place for those people that still think bike shops are not their place. Everyone that works in a bike shop is into the bike cult. You don't have plain boring people working at bike shops. So it's, I don't know. I think needs to be a lot of things going on depending on the community, and that's kind of what I want to do. I want people to start sharing their experiences and demystifying maybe what works and what doesn't work for each other.
Yeah, that's a great. I haven't got a chance to read that article, but that does hit the nail on the head for a lot of perspectives for me personally, because in my business, I'm it. Like, when you come to see my shop, you see me. And a lot of people of my customers, they like to know the mechanic. They like the person that they're working with. They like to have that relationship. And coming from a mom and pop shop back in the 90s, that's where that warm hug, we were busy and what have you, and it's just all that. But what has really made me feel very accomplished, even though I don't make a lot of money, but I feel like I'm very rich within the culture, is I'm providing a safe space for people to come to either buy a used bike or parts from me. I can work on their bikes and so forth, have that connection, and that intimidation is not there at all. It's not like you walk in and it's like walking in a Porsche shop with all the $10,000 bikes and $15,000 bikes in front of you. It's just, it's a guy's garage. And I have a new neighbor that just moved in, and he's like, I love you. This is great because, you're around the corner. I'm like, yeah, it's appointment based, but you could text me and let me know if you're going to need something real quick. I can help you out. But it's kind of like, for my business model, like you allude to make it enjoyable and work for you, because I did the weeks of nonstop working from 7 a.m. to 9 o'clock at night, 3 or 4 weeks, 5 weeks in a row in the summer back in the day, and you have massive burnout. A lot of that is just, people ask if I want to do a brick and mortar store again. I'm like, oh, hell no. If I can get this to work, like have people come to me by appointment, and I could carve out time for myself, elude, I'm going to Vegas tomorrow. We're gone for 6 days for a family trip. I'm not going to really miss any business because everything's appointment based. When I come back, I have 5 repairs already lined up. So I'm just back to work when I get back. And
flexibility is more important than time and money sometimes.
What's that? I'm sorry.
Flexibility is more important than time and money sometimes. Like, it's having the flexibility to do things that mesh with you getting to enjoy what you want to do and whatnot helps a lot. And that's kind of, another thing. But one thing I like to hit on, though, what you're talking about, the comfort wise, one of my, and this is some free advice I would give every retailer, no matter size, shape, or color. Uh, Give people that walk into your shop, no matter if they're buying something or not, a tour of the shop, and always start by introducing them to your service department. Um, because when someone buys a bike, the first time they return is to get something fixed or tuned up. And if they already have a introduction with whoever's working behind the counter, that is that's one of the best ways to take down someone's defense shield, in that giving them a little bit of understanding. And the number one person I always want people to meet is the mechanic, or the person that's going to work on that bike. Uh, so one, they don't fear them, because like too often people do.
Yeah.
And I get it. There's some crusty mechanics out there that are too fair, but I enjoyed my time working behind the wall.
Oh yeah,
And
I was crusty for a while. I got over it.
yeah, but that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great gold nugget there. Yeah, the introduction, the approach. When customers walk in, I still see it today, especially in the corporate stores, where it's still a lot of high end inventory. I mean, it's nice looking. I mean, it's marketed from, for that, but their market for them, for especially in my neck of the woods, has changed so much, where people walk in and they walk out just as fast. They're like, oh, I'm in the wrong place. And we have a couple other local shops here that are, you got bikes leaned up over here. It's kind of dusty, and it's kind of like, in a weird way, it's so unorganized, but it's comfortable to walk into. The floors creak. It's like, oh, I feel. And then you have like that old timer that pulls around the corner, like, hey, how you doing? And then looks at the bike you have in your hand, and he knows that bike inside and out, and has worked on 40 of them when they were new. And you get that warm kind of, like, oh, I'm in the right place kind of thing. And I mean, I do have customers that I take care of, but they still buy from the corporate stores. And the conversations I have with them are nothing like the experiences that we were trying to provide as a warm hug back in the day. And it's kind of like, well, they didn't have the bike, so I had to drive like 3 hours to go pick it up somewhere else at another, brand location store, or, then they have weird rumors like the mechanics have to bring in their own tools from home to work on bikes and stuff. And who knows how much that, it could be misconstrued, but it's just like, those stores don't feel like they were, or what they should be. And that alludes to like our current topic of, or maybe, allude into a current situation with bike shops. A lot of shops have failed. What do you see in your perspective of what's going to come out of all this? Like in the next year or two, what is the local bike shop going to look like?
That last article kind of dove into some thoughts of what I think that would help, but the bike shops, it's kind of funny. We've always lived in a manageable amount of chaos, in a sense. I think one of the problems we've had in the past is that we've always had these things come in right at the right moment to kind of save and keep us afloat. We had, the Lance effect, when cycling became mainstream. Well, that was happening while e-commerce is building. So no one took e-commerce seriously because business was good. So why do we need to like worry and adjust to it? Direct to customer stuff wasn't happening yet.
Yeah.
But by the time that plateaued, holy crap, like here we are, like, all of a sudden e-commerce, Wiggle, it's just this whole monster of things appeared. And then that's when Amazon Marketplace was starting to, their business, even though they sold stuff from Amazon, their moneymaker was becoming a marketplace for other people to sell through, including bike shops. And that was so alien to the majority of our industry and how that worked. And then it forced a lot of suppliers, and we talked briefly about it, but we've seen some of the big companies like, go off on their own and do their own thing and kind of create their own little environment of industry and whatnot. And they didn't do that because they wanted to get away from the others and crush anyone, but they did it because they needed to take and keep things organized internally, because it's hard for the best bike shop in the world to survive when they're swimming in a sea of chaos around them. When you have suppliers that are unpredictable, when you have other shops that are unpredictable, causing even more disruption. It's like this giant kind of mess. It's really hard to survive in, no matter how great your shop is. So in the future, that's one reason I think it's really important to get organized and form a more uniform voice, is because you know we don't know of anything coming about. Like, we had the Lance effect, and we had e-bikes that everyone swore they would never carry in 2015, 2016. I remember Interbike suppliers and retailers alike swore against them, and then they're late to the gate, but hey, they created a boost that we didn't suspect. And then the COVID boom, same thing. These little instances keeping us afloat. Well, we have to kind of approach things like that's going to run out someday. And there's a lot of dealers that are successful that don't focus on the problems that are happening and what affect them. I think the future bike shop needs to, whether they look like this or not, I think they need to start looking at reducing the risks. I have an article that I'm kind of scared to put up, but no, really, because I'm trying to promote my business, but at the same time, I'm talking to an already pissed off crowd, and it's some of the things that I'm going to say is not going to make people happy, because I'm here to help businesses. I'm not really here to make friends. I just hope I make friends because they find what we're doing helpful. But I think that, and I learned this working at Maxis, but when you put all your eggs in one basket, when you let your business be dependent on what other businesses do, you're setting yourself up for a lot of risks. Mm-hmm. And I think that a retailer is going to do better by playing it safer. Not to say you should or shouldn't jump on trends, but I think that they need to become more savvy, and if there is a dealer agreement, they need to be more protective of the retailer and the supplier equally, not, just say this, you're required to do this, or we're not going to, or we're going to pull. Like, there needs to be more obligation from the suppliers to the retailers. But no one's going to do that until we come together and create a more uniform voice. And that's kind of where this whole circle, like, we can't build a stable industry by starting up here and trying to work on these problems. We have to really get at the base, start communicating, build a base, build some uniform discussions and then start to solve the problems from there. Because right now the pyramid's upside down on how we're trying to solve things. So the future retailer, I think some of the risks, and everyone's diverse. So there's no one way to do it. And that's another reason why this platform, I think, is important. I want people to solve things with other peers that have similar challenges and form those kinds of solutions. I think it's arrogant for one person to advise a bunch of people on what the industry needs to do. And that's kind of why I want people sharing discussions and having organized ideas and things that they go off of. But on a grand scheme, yeah, I think that retailers need to be less dependent on one or two things. I think they need to diversify a little bit. We may hate those e-scooters, but we're here to make money, and sometimes a little bit of diversity can go a long way. And it doesn't have to be that. You can sell fishing gear or something like that, but Also look what other industries are doing on the retail side and kind of whatnot. One of the things I mentioned in my article about having a bread and butter shop separate from a specialty bicycle retailer is doing that also reduces the floor space immensely. If you remove your bread and butter bikes and accessories and things, you have less things to carry than cheaper rent. And here's the thing too, everyone bitches about mechanic pay. And I love this subject because it's something that's where I cut my teeth. When I go to any industry event, I hang out with the mechanics in that dark corner because those are my people. Those are, that the best stories come out of there. And I tell you, and they're really, I think, the most progressive part of our industry in that they are always looking for ways to learn and to set standards and to organize. And that's I love that kind of that train of thought that they have. So mechanic pay, I think, could also, and this is just, shooting, up into the air and seeing where it falls, but separating a shop where it's retail or specialty retail and bread and butter, you can also charge more labor rates in a specialty retailer than you can in a bread and butter shop, because part of the problem is our labor rates are based on every bike we sell, whether it's a $400 or $500 bike or a $10,000 bike. We charge that same hourly rate. But if you have a more of a specialty shop, you can charge lower rates at that bread and butter shop, and you can charge higher rates at the specialty shop, and that can mirror mechanic pay and qualifications. Mechanics may not be qualified to work in a specialty shop, so people that are learning on the job can start off in a bread and butter type environment, start off at that, a reasonable pay for that type of experience. But then you can have the more specialty mechanics in the specialty shops that charge specialty labor, making better pay. And that's just kind of, that's where you start from the ground up and build, because right now we have people asking for more pay and there's nowhere to get it from.
Yeah.
Someone reached out to me yesterday, and an old friend mentioned wanted me to write an article about the risk that mechanics take and the increase in injuries from, unloading and picking up e-bikes and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other, thing that it's hard for small shops to do, is provide, comparable insurance and then workman's comp. I've been through it, and it's a nightmare to go through that. So, I think that the future shops that are thinking ahead, starting to learn how to forecast. People laugh at me, when I talk about forecasting, because a business should really have a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and even a 10-year plan. Like once a year, you should do a 10-year meeting with your staff and come up with ways you want your business to look in 10 years. Even though that's fantasy world, it keeps you aimed in a direction. So when you come back to your 5 or 3 year plan, you can make small adjustments to it every year on kind of where you want that to be. And it keeps you not just moving forward, but it keeps you prepared for things. It also makes you think about risks. Like, I know a lot of people are making money on this new gadget, but that takes a lot of money to invest into it. And I don't know what it's going to look like 6 months from now. So you start to think like, well, here's the certain things I sell. Here's my bread and butter. Here's my consumer, and they need to start kind of narrowing it down to reduce risks. And don't be afraid to negotiate with suppliers.
Yeah, exactly. I think, for a long time, the suppliers had a pretty good stronghold on bike shops. And now it's kind of flipped where a lot of bike shops have the power and ability of saying, no, we're not going to carry that. It doesn't fit our actual mix, or our market has changed and we're not going to carry this, but we'll carry that. And it's having those relationships. And then, if you have a good supplier or a good rep, they're going to work with you and help you build your business because it's basically in their best interest. But it just, for a long time, I've known companies be very hardline on what you need to carry to have a dealer agreement and so forth. And that's caused a lot of disruption. But what I see now, in my neck of the woods is obviously service is where we're actually making some income this year, and bikes are not selling as much. And then, you know, community is another thing that's really been a big push on my channel of saying, hey, reach out to those local clubs, those rides, those charity rides, the Bike MS, those kinds of things, because that can really drive a whole culture of cyclists that may not have a shop yet, and they may not be even close to you. And here's my testimonial. It's like, I'm a garage shop. I have people driving an hour and a half away from South Denver all the way up to in Wyoming to have me work on their bikes. So it's not just the local footprint. And, you know, the YouTube has actually helped out with a lot of that because they now see the insights and like, oh, I want that individual to work on my bike. And, you know, granted, social media stuff like this it's hard. It's just, there's a lot to it. But if you just do like little 1 minute shorts or something of that nature and just, you know, put them around, that at least gives some insight of what your shop is, and you'll hook some of those customers. And the funny thing is, when I do that event, the Bike MS, I have people rolling by and like, hey, I know a guy, watch your channel, and that kind of thing. It's like the audience is there, even though the rest stop I work this year was right down the street, but years before it was like, you know, a good 30 minutes. It's not even my demographic market, but then again, my market is a lot bigger. So there's a lot of different perspectives you can change and, you know, try without a heavy lift. I call it going back to grassroots, like the 90s way of doing business. Like you do those events, and back in the 90s, I don't know, you mentioned the Bike MS and you worked with one or so. We used to have to pay as bike shops to be a part of it. And nowadays, all those events, they're so short-handed. They're screaming for any bike shop to help out. And there's a great opportunity. And this year, the Bike MS in Colorado, in the first time in a long time, had a bike mechanic at each rest stop. Years prior to that, there was big gaps. So that kind of shows that all the shops, even the corporate ones, are realizing that community outreach is now necessary to do. And
But the thing is, it's always been necessary. It's just back in the 90s, no consumers didn't have a choice. They had to go to a shop if they needed parts or service or a bike or a decent bike. And we brought up the MS-150 because the shop I worked at, in Houston, this is in the early to mid 90s. We were living outside of our shop to get our community to come to us. We were big on the MS-150, but we've learned that like there's several teams that get together, and it's groups of friends or maybe an organization or a small company. So we're like, well, we're a few minutes from downtown. Let's start hitting up these companies and see if they have like a wellness program or something like that, or just a group or a club. And next thing you know, we're helping these companies. Like every big company has a cyclist or two in it. And we're like, hey, here's this. And people didn't even know what the MS-50 was when we went to some of these companies, and all of a sudden they're like, wow, 100 miles a day for 2 days. Like I can't do that. And then they realize, touch someone that looks just like them, I did it. And next thing you know, you have this magnetic like force pulling people in. And I would go out and do workshops once every 1 or 2 weeks on site at the company during their lunch, and talk about little things like training, or a little bit about nutrition, a little bit about maintenance, things like that, kind of demystifying stuff. And we had 5 or 6 corporate teams with anywhere from 20 to the one time I mentioned, we had over 400 riders on that corporate team, and and we were a hallway shop. We were a super small shop in a strip little center, and this was how we brought people in, and we even had mobile repair and pickup in the neighborhood for customers and stuff. And this was 30 years ago, and we need more of that interaction with communities. And that's I wrote an article that uh, in Bicycle Retail years ago, and it kind of talked about uh, running a business versus a hobby. And, I think a lot of cases where owners, if you're doing a lot too much of the hands-on work, you're not spending enough time growing your business and going out there. And I was trying to explain it in more of a networking sense. Like, there has to be a return on investment, because too many owners feel bogged down right now because they don't have enough people to do what they need to do. So they end up in the same cycle. But showing a little ways to network where there's almost a guaranteed return on your investment involves that community interaction. In fact, I think today's bike shop and going forward, we need to look more like the bike shop of the 90s in how we relate to our community. Mm-hmm. I think too much focus was pulled away from that when e-commerce hit, because every bike shop felt like they needed to have an e-commerce site, or they needed to do drop ship, or they need to figure out direct to sales or direct to consumer. And they kept thinking, like, we have to modernize like everyone else. And it took away the bandwidth they used to use for their communities. And I think that can change. I think that there's still a really big demand for shops in the communities, but they're not going to come to you like they did in the 90s. You have to create excuses for them to see you and to do things and whatnot. So you have to get creative. And that's kind of what I want to go into, and not just write an article about, but I want other shops to share what they've done, so other shops can do it too. Or maybe share what they tried to do and didn't work, so other shops may not do it. Because when you have 1,000 minds thinking together and sharing the do's and don'ts, there's so much less guesswork in it.
Yeah. Well, another thing too is what didn't work 5 or 10 years ago may work today. That's another thing too. And it's, with the community outreach, and this is one of the interesting things. It's like a lot of, you're talking like, it's all these events are in the heat of the season. I mean, you're 2 weeks out in repairs, you're behind on bike builds, you're just pulling your hair out. You haven't had a day off in several weeks. And then you're like, you want me to do this event? Well, the event starts in the off season. And if you really leverage it correctly, with any of these events, you can get a hold of organizers and do like off season, like you were going to different businesses and building up their teams and so forth for the events. You can do that. Also, you can do like, clinics and talk about the events, or social gatherings before that, because you could have several or even training rides for those events when it's not quite that season. And then you can capture all those either new bike sales that they want to get for that event, or repairs, or what have you, because you get the idea. How I look at it is like, it already paid itself 10 times fold before you even get to the day of the event. And when you just show up, it should be your lead team, the best representing of your company, or even the owners, because my parents always did it. I mean, they're the best representative of their shop, because it's their shop. I do it, same thing. And you get the best connection and understanding of the event, and instead of having not to dog having just general mechanics out there. They need to be out there too. But I think it's so much enlightening of what you're doing this in the first place. I mean, it's like, it gets you so connected. Even in the heat of the season, I walk into July right after doing the MS, I'm just jazzed. I'm like, I'm back in it. It's like I got that shot in the arm of like, I want to keep doing this. And that kind of event, if you work it right, it will definitely make your shop and yourself better.
We used to do I've I guess one of my claimed fames I would call successes, and these are accidental successes, but we're looking for something to do in the off season. Uh, and we thought, hey, let's like, right, there's a couple of local bars in our area, let's do a little pub crawl. There's just three of us. And next thing, like we invited a few people. And within and this is a weekly Thursday night thing, within a few weeks, we were having like 20 people show up. Any bike, didn't matter what you rode. Better to be a mountain or something just because, but then we would have an average of like 25, 30 people show up and even up to over 100. And that ride went on for over 20 years after I left.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, 2 weeks ago, one of those people from that ride came through and stayed, him and his son stayed with me. These are people I'm still friends with, even though we're 800 miles apart. When I come into town, that's who I get with. That's who I associate with. And these are not racers. These are just regular people that are just looking for some blow off some steam, some active exercise that's fun. And next thing you know, they're doing the MS-150 and they're doing those, and it's crazy. And I remember we won the Spirit Award one year and broke it like that night. Cause when we went bowling that night, we took it in the bowling alley and, we had such a party atmosphere and, it was great. And, we've started some rides like that here that are just casual, nothing training. It's community friendly rides. And we partner with restaurants, we partner with other businesses. And that's another thing too, I think more retailers should do is partner with other local small businesses and help each other out.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm in the works of doing, it's like a pub style. They have 2 locations. And I was floating an idea is like, hey, what if we have like a pub to pub ride? I mean, it's 15 miles. It's manageable, things like that. So yeah, I mean, that there, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of ideas. I think your platform gives a great avenue for a lot of people to jot those down instead of like, oh, I saw that one video from the guy, which one of his videos that he mentioned that, and am I going to sit here for 2 hours and try to find that one topic piece, where the article layout would be definitely really easy to search and pinpoint and actually add to the discussion for theirs.
Each article ends up after so much time, it actually goes and lives because blog articles get buried over time.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes and lives in the industry hub, the main forum. So people can keep the conversation going there and it can get regurgitated anytime it becomes relevant. And that's the thing too. I want this to eventually grow into a resource. Everything's categorized. So you can look up categories, whether it's retail, sales, community, things like that. The crystal ball is one of my favorite categories because it goes into kind of, that foresight and that thinking ahead type stuff, and all the articles are right or not. I try to keep them less opinionated and more discussion, generating, so to speak. So, but yeah, I think that, right now, and kind of what you said in the beginning, it kind of, you hear crickets right now, and it's because it's something no one's ever really seen or done before. And, everything on the internet is supposed to be free. And, so yeah, having a paywall to comment, and discuss things seems ridiculous. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, well, I want this to be a return on your investment. And I priced it to where it's an annual fee that's cheaper than anything else that's out there for, any subscription, no matter what it is. And I want people from both, anywhere from shop rat to management to join. Same thing with suppliers, from marketing to sales to everyone, because one of the things I find that's most productive is, instead of a manager coming to tell everyone what to do, it's really proactive. If you have your group or your employees go and learn on their own or read over some material or look over a discussion, ahead of time, when everyone comes to that meeting, everyone has an opinion or idea that one person alone is probably not going to come up with on their own. So it brings more ideas to the table. And I tell you, just basic employee treatment, you want your employees to value what they do. They're not going to value things when you just are constantly telling them what to do. This is how it's going to be. But if they have input on what you're doing, they're going to not just value it. The likelihood of them carrying it out and owning it is going to be much greater, even if it's not the idea they thought of. The fact that they were just involved and have a say in things, even at the lower levels, that right there is how you get your employees to value your business, because otherwise they're just there to earn a check. And with as much risk as there already is and trouble with, payroll and things like that, um, you're going to have your employees have a more value in your business, on top of the likelihood of better things happening in your business, because, hey, you have some ideas that you never would have thought of being thrown in there. And I'm telling you, I'm not picking on us old folks like me, but these kids are like I've got 17, 18-year-old daughters, and their perspective of things is so much different than mine. And it's not that anyone's right or wrong. It's just that they have an expanse of information and knowledge that I'm not privy to. And we need more of that. We need more open-mindedness towards those things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've worked in team meetings where if you even just the part timer and they have a voice, and yeah, like you mentioned, you have projects how to improve things or ideas that come from customers. It's like, I've had a staff of 25 to 30 below me, being a GM, and the conversations are just like, woo, I did not even think it's going to go this direction. And some of it's productive and some of it's like, oh, well, but it's good to have that in those conversations. And, we talked about like the cycling community and so forth. In bike shops, there's a community inside the shop itself. I mean, like you allude to, like, I like to hang out with the mechanics. So do I. I mean, I'm just, I gravitate. We speak the same language. We have the same jokes, and we have similar perspectives. We all hate internal routing. I mean, just joking. But I mean, it's like you have those connections, and if you could relate to, open the conversation, even if it was to the suppliers, to the manufacturers. I think there's, it's a great opportunity. Like if a manufacturer got onto your site, read some things, what's going on in the actual grassroots. I mean, some have their own stores and they have some feedback, but they're not getting the big picture, or some of the big picture. And if they need to do small increment changes in their company, which a lot of them are, they're all, I mean, they have to be right now. Our scenario right now is like everybody has been put on their back heels and pulling out their pen and paper going, what do we do from here? You may have good ideas, because they can't, like you're saying, from the wholesaler side or the supplier side, you can't just change something and it's going to be done in a week like you do at the bike shop level. But you're looking at,
I know margins are such a huge thing right now, and they keep getting worse and worse. And I think that if retailers were more familiar with some of the challenge their suppliers had, and this is kind of where I get into whole, the communication thing, their request, like retailers don't realize, and this is not dogging retailers don't realize how unreasonable their requests are sometimes, because they simply don't understand the capabilities of those suppliers. In addition to time, on the manufacturing side, we had raw suppliers, we had, manufacturing. Then you go in to start, you have landed cost, and then you have to wholesale cost, and then you have retail, and then OEM fits in there, somewhere else. And it's very complicated on how to add and divide things up. And I think if retailers knew what they had to like, if they had discussions about things after they knew what they had to deal with as far as the limitations of a supplier and whatnot, their conversations would start very differently and end up in a very different place. And when you have more retailers doing that together in a more timely and more organized fashion, getting that voice to suppliers, all of a sudden, the suppliers is like, okay, I see a trend that I can depend on. So I'm going to try to offer a more realistic compromise that more people can live with. That doesn't happen now, and it should. And I'm not trying to be cocky or trying to push my business, but it's really how basic it's business 101. It's basically dealers, retailers need to do better, but so their suppliers can't unless they get better and more organized feedback. And I'm not talking, long-term forecast, because not right now, currently, there's no way for us to forecast or a retailer to forecast a year from now. But there's a balance of retailers reducing some of the risks in addition to having a better voice that suppliers can live with or can go off of that's more reliable. And then, things work. We've seen what happens when dealers do start screaming about something, and then 6 months later it changes, and all of a sudden it's created even a bigger problem than the original one. It's a cycle, and we keep repeating it. And I'm not saying we need to go outside of our comfort zones too much, but I think if we communicate first, we will be able to get outside of our comfort zones a little bit and explore things. Because once we see someone else's success with maybe direct to customer, like, hey, this is how we made it work, they're going to go like, hey, that's great. Let's more of us start doing that. And you're going to start seeing those trends build. And, I didn't price, my paywall to be anything like any other organization. It's $3 a month average for a retailer. It's pennies, but because my whole concept is this is not going to work unless we have a large volume of people involved.
Yeah.
If I charge more, I could maybe make a little more money, but I wouldn't have that smaller dealer. I wouldn't have that entry level, person in the bike shop. I want to get a volume of people involved. And I priced everything. I hope it is where it's livable, but because I know things are hard and people don't like paying for things that they don't understand. But it's I tried to make it as fluid as possible, and I hope people find a value in it. It is hard getting out there when you have something different and a resistive industry that's going through what it is right now. So but we'll see.
Yeah, I think it gets some good traction. It basically hits a lot of the conversations that I have been with my communities, and going back to the front lines of the consumer or smaller bike shops, you have a topic that I come up with, and I try to be kind of PC about it. I mean, it's my opinion piece, of course, but and just kind of laying it out there. And there's a lot of anger that comes out of it sometimes. And, you're not going to resolve or make things better by a whole bunch of people just screaming. But if you have a constructive conversations I'm talking about the manufacturers with the bike shop people, big and small, and in between, they can come with a solution. And some of those solutions could be a pretty easy lift for both sides, and somewhat of a profitability to increase or help offset the margin loss. Case in point, and this is just off the cuff. By listening, I just came up with this idea. It's like, okay, I'm in a platform world, which I'm a bike mechanic doing YouTube. And for me, AdSense is something where I'm trying to lead towards, because that's where I know I could grow my presence or my income without a large lift of daily working on bikes. There's only so many bikes I can work on a day. There's only so many repairs, so many whatever. But that evergreen videos that generates that passive income helps dramatically. Well, what do you say you have? And Trek did something, a little bit of this, giving a kickback to some of their dealers if a bike is sold or something, or their products are sold in their area with their dealer there, they get a little bit of kickback. I mean, that's a good direction, but that could be 10 times fold to all these different companies that have switched from only being in bike shops to now shifting into, selling online and so forth. There's a lot of those customers, even if it's a part, may need help installing that part, or I got a frame and the bottom bracket needs to be faced, or, nobody in their right mind, if they're going to be using the tool on a regular basis, should not be buying a $300 thread chaser. I mean, that's where the bike shop lives. I mean, I have a couple, and I could tell you I've only used them maybe twice in the last 2 years in my volume. So as a consumer, I don't think you need to be buying that. That's why there's what I'm trying to get at is there's connections where even it might be very small, that could work for the bike shop, could work for their online sales, as well as bigger shops, as well as manufacturers and wholesalers. And they've all gone creative in their own ways to try to make things work for them. But if they kind of, like you said, it's hard for them to get out of their comfort zone, but it's like, what's going to help the small shop that actually is going to be putting that Silco wax on their chains, or things like that, like those
out there. And I think that it's a great practice to take everyone's ideas and then discuss what works and what doesn't work and the challenges each face, because someone may have an idea to maybe, hey, let's try pushing this chain wax service. And then someone can say like, yeah, we just don't we tried that and didn't work. Or you may have someone say like, hey, we started doing that, and we started actually going and to events and setting up a booth once a month. And there's different ways, and people can see that from each other, and try new things with a lower risk is everyone's dream. And because when you try something and you're crossing your fingers, no matter how good of an idea it is in your head, in practice, that consumer, who we all know is fickle and a pain in the butt to deal with, and how to reach them. But there's dealers out there, there's retailers that have that magic sauce, and they've figured something out, and they've tried stuff, and they're like, and I tell you, no one wants anything more than to share their good ideas. They're not afraid of people stealing it and honing on their business. They're proud of what they've done, and they want to help the industry. Everyone in our industry wants to help each other. And regardless if we get angry sometimes, we get angry because we care. And it's, I want to see that, more dealers networking to be able to share these productive ideas so they can happen in reality, and then not take the risk of things and spinning their wheels like we do so often.
Yeah, it's I think there's opportunity. I mean, I've seen a lot of growth even in my channel, in my small space on either YouTube or Facebook, and also a website and locally, like little things like, the chain waxing or the frame detailing or the things like that I've kind of gravitated to because I think they're cool, and people will get like, oh, that's kind of cool. And I've had successes there, and I'm more than happy. And I have share alike. And try to help businesses. And people could tell me like, oh, that doesn't work in our market. And it's like, okay, that's fine. But have you tried it lately? Was it like 2 years ago when waxing was not known? And now it's in the Tour de France, and they're seeing on shelves in every bike shop they go into. And, big chains are actually doing wax services using silica and, things like that. It's like, like I mentioned before, it's like what may not work a few years ago may work today. And having those insights, I mean, you have several 3.5 more decades of experience in the cycling industry, and alluded to myself. I mean, even on a bad day, we have at least one good idea. You know?
Well, I just glanced over the comments, and sorry, I've not been paying attention. You told me about that. This last one here, um, Forbin Colossus, he mentioned, what about seniors and doing a workshop for seniors? That right there, if you're not hitting the boomer crowd in some way or fashion, they have money to spend.
Yeah.
Generation Z, X may have some, but those folks right there have a lot of time in their hands. They want to learn, they're eager to learn, and they have communities. They have
Mhm.
buzzwords, whether it's in their neighborhoods, their churches, or wherever they can be found. If they have a pleasant experience with something, they're going to get their friends involved. It's like they're a bunch of teenagers that are hungry, that have money.
Oh, yeah.
And with e-bikes, and I've seen even these like the e-bike tricycles and stuff, and it all depends on your terrain or where you are, but you know those that's easy money.
Oh, I call them the Granny Club. We have a loop in Loveland here, which is a 20-mile loop. It's all paved, and I ride it. I mean, it's right out of my back door. I mean, it's just so easy for me just to jump and go for a ride. And I'm about 9 times out of 10, I see the grannies, and they're like about 6 to 8 of them, sometimes 12 at a time, and they're all on e-bikes. They're not going fast. They're always taking breaks because I hit them. I see them at least twice in a ride. I catch up to them or loop them or whatever, and they are having a ball. I mean, you could just set. They're like super nice or waving, and if my daughter's riding with me, she's 9, and they're giggling, and it's just they're having a great time. And that's the e-bike market possibility. There's just a club. But that's just a small snapshot of all the other groups that are out there on the bike paths, and that's just the bike paths. You're not talking anything about I mean, I'm in Colorado. We got mountains. We got everything. I mean, it's like so the opportunity of the senior. And the funny thing is it's funny you bring that up, and thanks for Colossus to bring that up, because my community used to be a retirement community and now it's been overrun by a suburb. So it's a good, healthy mix of ranch homes with double stackers. I mean, it's like every other one. And my neighborhood is built that way. And there's a ton of them. And to give the opportunity for those individuals to get out and ride and at their age and be able to keep up. And with those trikes that you mentioned, some are e-bike versions, they're just having a great time. And that's a huge opportunity.
I didn't mention this earlier, and probably should have, but I built this platform not to help the bicycle industry. I want to increase ridership. I want consumers to have a better experience. I want them to understand and be a part of the bike culture. And I just happen to believe very strongly that our retail channels are the best path to increasing ridership and creating the best experience possible for the consumer. And that's what I think every company in our industry, supplier, retailer alike, should really work up from. They should look at how to best support the consumer. And a supplier should look at retailers and go, hey, how can we help you support your consumer? And that should be the focus to help them build. And shops should reach out to retailers like, hey, can you do this for me? I'm putting on a ride, or hey, this is something we've been looking for. I'm looking for some support. I'll tell you, as both a manufacturer, working as a manufacturer and a distributor, we loved like looking for excuses. I have called when I was working as a rep, I would call my vendors all the time and say, hey, can you do this for us? I would get sponsorship. I've always been involved with different nonprofit organizations like IMBA and SORBA here in the South, coach for our high school mountain bike and middle school teams. And I'm always saying, hey, can you help us support this? Can you send us some things or whatnot? They love that stuff. Suppliers have a pile of things or ways that they can help you if you just ask for it. And again, it's community focused. So
yeah, to even know that's available. I mean, if people have been in a shop for a while, they can really lean on their suppliers and so forth. But even events like you're talking about, if you're just an event organizer where you're trying to put on raise money for the trail system in your neck of the woods and that kind of thing, you can reach out to a lot of them, and a lot of them will be like, oh, we're more than happy to either give you some samples of stuff or actually have representatives help you organize. It depends what their capacity is. But they're all looking for something, especially in these times, like to get their brand out there. I mean, it's huge because it's right now, people are tightening up on their purse strings, and if you give them an opportunity and a reason and education of your product or your services, from bike shop to brands to what have you, they'd be more inclined. Oh, okay, I feel comfortable investing into this or doing that or having that worked on. Or for me, its service has been really good, but that's my business model ish anyway. But it's for me, it's been enlightening to work with a lot of my old customers as well as new customers. I mean, and it's really funny is when you're doing something and this is what really gets me, is when I've had a couple of customers that I've shipped to, they're not even local to me. They wrote letters, pen and paper, I mind you, handwritten, of a thank you letter of like, oh, I received my bike today. It's great. You inspired me to ride your videos or whatever. It's just like, oh, I must be doing something right. I mean, somebody wrote a letter and mailed it to me. And it's just amazing.
Yeah. And that's, and we need to realize that the support for retailers is out there. We just need to make sure we're doing what, is the best for our communities. And, we need to also become more diverse. It's still, an old white guy's industry. And, it's, I say that sitting here with you, but we really need to champion the fact that it's just everyone's welcome. Everyone has learned to ride a bike at some point in their life, but 95% of them won't step foot in a shop. And it's, even though we're the best and we offer the greatest service in the world to that consumer, we don't realize that our bike culture, the more culture you have, the more intimidating you are. It's like me walking into a Ferrari dealership. They can have the nicest people and be most welcoming in the world, but I feel out of place there. If I walk into if a average consumer walks into a shop and it's a bunch of dudes and there's a bunch of parts that they don't recognize, it doesn't matter what it is. It's just they don't feel, they feel out of place.
Yeah.
But if you go into a more generalized store where it doesn't have that culture and it doesn't have a bunch of questionable looking purple anodized things on the shelves, people just walk in and feel like, oh, like no one's, I'm like just here, whatever. There's nothing special about it. And that's kind of where I want shops to start kind of weighing things and like trying to live the fantasy of being that super cultural bike cult shop. That's great to enjoy, but if you're trying to become profitable, you got to start looking at what your community is going to buy. And if it's not, if you're basically shunning 3/4 of your community and no one else is there to grab them, you've got to start rethinking things. And that's kind of the future of bike shop, I think. And if the existing bike shops aren't doing it, these new people that are coming from the e-scooter world and one wheel stuff, they don't care. They're going to come in, they're going to say, oh, I'm going to start selling one wheels. Oh, I'm going to add e-bikes to the side. We're not a bike shop. We're an e-mobility store. And right now, I think we have a lot of bike shops, that are 100% capable and equipped to handle these other like communities, this other part of their community. And why not if it's going to be a better profit center for them? And it's, we've got to start really weighing what's important. And I hate seeing shops go out of business. In fact, a lot of what I want to talk about going in the future is if you're going to go out of business, don't wait till the last second. I want people to kind of be prepared in how to scale down and things like that. I hate that we invest so much in our businesses only to lose it because we just waited too long. And I want feedback from people like former bike shop owners. I want people like that too to come in and kind of like discuss their, what they wish they would have done maybe, or what they did and how it worked out. But yeah, I think there's going to be a whole lot of change. Well, there already has been a lot of change, but I think that, this is kind of cliche, but for every, shop that closes, another one's going to pop up at some point in time to serve that community. And because let's face it, people need a bike shop, but they're not going to spend money at one they don't feel comfortable with. So, it's I don't know, it's really hard. And every community is different. That's one reason I want to bring people into conversations, because I can say what people should do, but that's not going to work in town A, B, or C. It may work in, town W, but there's too much variation for one person to kind of say what the future shop looks like. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's all based on the community, your area, your demographics. Is it a poor community or rich community? All those things are variables. And I've been fortunate enough to work in several different of those demographics and changes, and from big to small. And yeah, to me, what I've seen a lot of changes into more of a niche, like then the cycling realm. It's gotten so big, and especially when you add gravel and the e-bike and all those other things, a smaller shop may not be able to do all of it. And that's where some of those, I've seen a lot of shops kind of scale down. Is like, this is what works for us in our community, in our little area, in our little corner. And then they scale down and get smaller, but they're actually bigger, if that makes sense.
yeah. Well, that the last article I wrote kind of goes into a little bit of that. A discussion I had that was on LinkedIn that I jumped in on was about how the OEM specs have gotten boring compared to what they were like in the 90s. In the 90s, you got some pretty cool spec bikes that were closer to almost like a custom build. And, it's everything back then. There's more mountain bike categories today than there were total categories 20 years ago,
Oh yeah.
So everything has become more streamlined. Everything's become more specific, and it's hard. And then you have not just the number of categories skyrocketing, you have the number of brands and companies that provide them also skyrocketing. So it becomes even more confusing on what you carry and what stands out. And that's kind of where there needs to be a little bit better balance as far as how we control our inventory, how we still remain cool and how we still remain profitable. But that's kind of where I kind of dive into a little bit about why I think that there needs to be specialty bike shops and non-specialty bike shops, like, where there's no one to fill that gap. And, there's one thing to have a specialty road or maybe specialty mountain and whatnot, but, we're running into things to make it more complicated. And the last comment, it was like, bike shop have been treating me weird for 40 years, and I'm 58 now from heavy metal cycles. And I think that's kind of exactly what a lot of people need to kind of come to terms with, is that with so much more information available to the average consumer now, some people just want to go in and buy and figure it out for themselves. They don't need the special treatment or the service. Now, if we exist in a certain way to where they start to see the value in things like that. We instead of us shoving it down their throat, a lot of those times those people will come to terms. But if we're, you know, being a little too more forward with it, it's just not going to work with many of today's consumers unless they're already willing to put on the chain bracelet and become part of the cult, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And I mean, a lot of people chime in. I could do that myself. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of YouTube videos that do a lot of that. And I have a lot of customers in which I do implore a lot of people to like try it yourself, work on it, figure it out. It's really good to understand how your bike works, especially if it breaks down in the middle of nowhere. And those things are really beneficial for you. But if it doesn't, like I'm here when things get a little too weird, and and I'll won't judge. I mean, I've had several people just totally train wreck their drivetrain trying to adjust derailleurs, and they're like, "Let me show you how to do it." And for them, they're like, "I will never get my head around it." That's how they are like. That's fine. I'll have you fix that or do that part of it.
We used to threaten to take people's tools away. Like, you can work on your bike once, but you do it again, we're going to come take your tools away. And
yeah. Oh, my dad, he had a great one. It's like, it was about shop rates. It's like, okay, our tune-up is this. It's this price if you watch, and it's this price if you help.
well, I just saw an ad, and this is crazy. I can't remember who made the comment on LinkedIn, but I know, it was one of my friends that they own a shop here, a chain of stores. He put General Motors is, I think you can pay $3,000 to help build your own Corvette. Like, you get to actually go turn wrenches on the thing. And I was thinking, like, holy cow, how patient are those mechanics to sit there with the consumer? And I can't imagine the anxiety that would rush through me if I had a consumer sitting there, like, trying to show them how to adjust the limits on their driller, and it's, but again, that might be a niche that, it's,
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, I got where I was because I had to learn, like, through experience and by bugging people until they showed me how to do stuff, and it's, I'm grateful that I just happened to land in a shop with some really patient people because, man, I was a pain in the butt.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think we all were pain in somebody's butt at some point. And still today, I'm still somebody's pain in a different form. But yeah. Well, coming to the top of the hour, let's see. There anything else that we haven't covered? Do you want to bring home about the industry grease?
Yeah, I mean, this is,
Where are you going to be? What are you going to be doing? What's around the corner for you? What you got
well,
there?
I right now I'm trying to drum up participation. This is, you talk about, I advise people to go into the unknown as far as, like, don't do it, don't take risks, get some feedback from other people before you make decisions so you're not spinning wheels. Well, there's nothing out there like this in our industry. And so I didn't have anyone to go to really. And I mean, I got a lot of advice from a lot of people, and it's not easy trying to find someone that's been in my position that has seen so many perspectives as far as, retail before, during, and after the internet explosion, at the same time, the supply and the manufacturing side and those challenges and whatnot. That trying to get participation is going to be my biggest challenge. Um, I've tried to create some fun parts. I have an advice column called Dear Bicycle Industry, and people can submit questions, and it can be relationship advice, it can be customer advice, it can be anything they want. It's designed to be as informal as it is hilarious. And for people that may want to ask something particular and not get fired for it, all questions are posted anonymously. So, uh, and my future, I want to start building up guests that come in and answer those questions. So people from the bike industry can come in and answer whoever they can pick from a series of questions that get sent in. And, I think that's a fun little part of it too. But, I'm really laid back. I'm not like, I don't want to come across as saying like, this is what everyone needs. Come do this. I really just want everyone to engage with each other. And I'm hoping they see the attraction of this. I hope that it doesn't look like it's too time consuming, because I know a lot of people don't have time. So I'm trying to design it. I'd like to put together a podcast. That's kind of what I'm planning on doing, because I want to be able to summarize everything into a more digestible format. So if whether it's an article or discussion on the forums, I can basically bring in, a weekly or bi-weekly podcast that summarizes everything into one nice tidy package that's easy to listen to or view. So that's probably one of the things next on my table.
Nice. Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that or listening to that. I have a lot of people that right now, you can see in the chat column, several of them are in bike shops. They're currently working on bikes right now, and they're listening to my jibber jabber on a weekly basis. So I'm sure they'd be more than happy to maybe even get better insights than what I provide or a different perspective, at least.
Well, that's it. I'm trying to bring not my perspective, but other people's perspective together and share that. Because I think that I can, no matter even if I had an Einstein level intelligence in the bike industry, I still think it's arrogant for one person to advise an entire industry in a direction that may or may not work for them. So I want to create a place to get conversations started so everyone else can help each other.
Yeah, that sounds great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me on a Tuesday.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Hopefully, if you're watching this on replay, please put some comments below, share your experiences. In the description, I do have a link to Industry Grease and a little bit of information there. Check it out, read a couple of those articles. You want to subscribe, go for it. It's
my email in there if someone wants to reach out and have any questions. I have a contact for them, but they're welcome to email if they have any questions about anything.
Awesome. All righty. Well, here we go. There's a couple of people like, I'm working on a mid-drive conversion. Yeah, Precision e-bike. He's one of my locals that he does just e-bike stuff. So we work great in tandem because I do non-e-bike stuff. And so we work back and forth. So that's how our little ecosystem works up here. We lean on each other for sure. And hopefully this resonates to a lot of people out there. And if you have any conversations, add to this one and also jump on to Industry Grease. I'll be there chiming in as well. And hope everybody has a good day. Any last words before we sign off there, Trey?
Oh, thanks, Justin. I appreciate the time. And like I said, if anyone has any questions, let me know. I'm really open. I'm transparent, and I'll try not to say anything that ticks anyone off. But I'm going to tell you like it is, and it's. I hope that goes somewhere.
Oh yeah. Well, some people just need the hard truth, and sometimes listening to it and hearing it out loud, it does help. Even though it's not something exactly we want to hear. It's something we actually need. In any case, well, thanks for hanging out with me. If it's nice in your neck of the woods, please go for a ride. And until next Tuesday, it's Shop Talk Tuesday. Hope to see you there.